Blessed Maria Assunta, situated on a hill 700 meters in altitude, the small town of Forse in Italy has about 5,000 inhabitants. It was there that, on 20th August 1878, was born little Maria Assunta Palotta, whose time on earth was simple, humble, and filled with virtue. It is said that, a few moments after her birth, the child raised her eyes to heaven and smiled. Of a gentle and peaceful nature, Assunta was the first ray of sunshine in the family home, where four brothers and a sister would soon join her. The Hail Mary learned at her mother's knee remained a habitual prayer of her life. She attended school just for the time necessary to learn to read and write, but even while still young at school, she was a peaceful and serious student who was known to already be wise. While still young, she had to devote herself daily to helping in the family home. She was a skillful little housekeeper, very active and with common sense. As the elder sister, she helped her mother in many ways, taking good care of the smaller children as the size of the family increased. Each evening, she paid a visit to the church to pray before the Blessed Sacrament, taking her little brothers and sisters sometimes, or some of her companions. She was attracted to prayer from an early age. She especially loved the Blessed Virgin Mary, feeling like one of her daughters. She loved to set up little altars with pictures of Mother Mary in the countryside and decorated them with flowers. Assumpta's holiness influenced the people around her. She gathered the children around her age in the church or else on the veranda, talking to them about God. They felt the goodness of God very near, because Assumpta clearly loved God with all her heart. On Sundays and when Assumpta had some free time, she would spend time in the church, kneeling in front of the altar, talking with Jesus, who is the friend of poor and needy people. Apprenticed to the old tailor in the village, she liked to place in front of her a holy picture which she looked at from time to time while her lips murmured the Hail Marys of the Rosary. In order to help her family, she courageously faced the humblest and hardest work. At a certain time, she worked as a diligent little laborer, carrying in a willow basket the materials necessary for the construction work. At the age of 12, Assumpta received Jesus at the Eucharist for the first time. It was an inexpressible moment of happiness for her, the memory of which would remain as one of the most beautiful of her life. The thought that during his mortal life Our Lord had not a stone on which to lay his head, urged the young girl to mortify herself even during the time of sleep. Often her mother had to take out of the Assunta's bed either bricks or pieces of sharp wood or iron, which were quickly replaced without the pious child saying a word. Very different from the little girls of her age, she preferred silence and solitude. Among her companions there was only one, Marietta Fideli, who merited to be called her friend because of similar tastes and pious fervor. Could this soul docile to the inspirations of grace, so open to the things of heaven, have any other ideal than that of belonging totally to God? Sure of the divine call, Assunta confided her plans to her parish priest, her director, who encouraged her nascent vocation. After some months of struggle with the tenderness of her family, who wanted to keep her, Assumpta, aged 20 years, left her paternal home on the 4th May 1898, said goodbye to the beloved surroundings of her childhood, and went to Rome to the Franciscan missionaries of Mary, whose foundress, Mother Mary of the Passion, had favorably accepted her request for the mission. Without much effort, the new postulant became accustomed to this type of life which she desired so much, her happy and recollected manner testifying to the happiness of her soul, experienced in the service of the Lord. Assumpta remained 3 months in Rome as a postulant, then she was sent to Gorota, where she completed her postulancy. She returned to Rome for her happy taking, and the very day of the ceremony returned to Grottaferrata. During her time as a postulant, Assumpta was employed in the kitchen, humble and silent. She fulfilled her charge so perfectly that for a long time she was cited as a model for those who came after her. On 9 October 1898, with the white habit of the missionaries of the Blessed Virgin, she was permitted to keep her dear name of Assumpta. The same day, the new novice was sent to the convent of Grottaferrata. In this enchanting place, where everything favored peace and recollection, she would live the ideal which she glimpsed and kept faithfully until her death. In Grotta Ferrata, Sister Maria Assunta was employed in work in the fields. She was there under the hot summer sun, biting the heavy golden sheaves of the harvest. At the time of the vintage, she could be seen in the vineyard, gathering the beautiful branches of grapes in silence, preoccupied only with her duty. Prayer alone accompanied the work of her hands. In this modest field of work, sparing herself neither time nor trouble, Sister Maria Assumpta was as happy as in the most attractive work. To serve God and her neighbor in the humblest and most mortifying ways, this was her motto. It enabled her to feel true Franciscan joy. 2 years passed. On 8th December 1900, in the chapel of St. Helen in Rome, Sister Maria Assunta had the joy of pronouncing her first vows in the presence of Mary of the Passion. Was it on that day or another occasion that Mother Foundress told Sister Assumpta that she should become a saint? Prophetic words. The future saw it realized. On her return to Grotta Ferrata, the charge of the farmyard was confided to her. Day and night she was actively zealous, full of care of her numerous lodgers. Then when winter came, she was occupied with harvesting of the olives, always supernatural. Sister Maria Assumpta encouraged her companions to offer to God as many acts of love as the number of olives they gathered. In Florence, the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary had just opened a house under the patronage of the Holy Name of Jesus. From the first months of the foundation, in January 1902, obedience called Sister Maria Assunta there. Without having any fixed employment, she helped in all the charges. When there was extra work, or when a harder job presented itself, one was sure to find her ready. She accepted the request of her service with a lovely smile. Nothing changed her good humor. This angelic patience, the gentleness of her character, caused her to be sent as a helper to the infirmary where the sick benefited from the charitable devotedness of their improvised nurse. Sister Assumpta's simplicity was sometimes the subject of joyous recreations in Florence. Who would not smile at her emotion the day she fulfilled the duty of washing the two watchdogs, when she saw the poor patients fall unconscious because of the energetic rubbing she gave them. On another occasion, when Sister Assumpta was sleeping in the sacristy to guard the sanctuary, it happened that, because of an early morning mass, the place was needed. The bed and the sleeper were both carried out to another place, without her peaceful sleep being in the least disturbed. Together with the perfume of her virtues, the house in Florence retains the memory of a very beautiful day for Sister Maria Assunta. On 30th February 1904, she was admitted to perpetual profession. With what fervor must she have renewed her resolution to become a saint, in order to respond to the graces from heaven of which she judged herself unworthy. Another happiness awaited her. Her great desire to go on the missions which she had finally expressed to her Mother General was to be granted. One evening in March 1904, the news of a coming departure aroused great excitement. All eyes turned towards the one who seemed to be the most worthy of this favor. Assumpta, filled with joy, was really this chosen person. Then standing up, she allowed her enthusiasm to overflow in a joyous refrain. Nevertheless, she added straightway, If Jesus had preferred me in Florence, era lo stesso, it would be the same thing. So she is again in Rome, where for the last time she went up and down the beautiful cloisters, which she would never see again. It was also a supreme goodbye which she exchanged with Mary of the Passion, because this little group destined for China was the last sending of the Foundress before her departure for heaven. On 19th March 1904, the travelers embarked at Naples. The events of the long journey are recounted with gaiety in a letter that the Sister Assunta wrote to the community in Florence. She concluded with this note which characterized her: "I am very happy to be approaching my mission, but if God wished, I would be equally happy to be swallowed up by a big fish." After a stop in Bombay and a halt at Jeffo, the third and hardest stage of the journey through China took place in a sitting chair that Sister Maria Assunta described in her correspondence as like small covered carriages but without wheels, carried by two mules, one in front and the other behind. The paths are very bad, but, thank God, we arrived safely at Dong Yukio. So the young missionary arrived at her desired destination, this land of China, so many times watered by the blood of martyrs. What would be the field of her apostolate? Always the most obscure and the most hidden. But God, who exalts the humble, would soon be pleased to manifest how meritorious in His eyes was this hidden existence. Ardently, Sister Maria Assunta began to study the Chinese language in order to be able to speak of the goodness of God to those around her. However, her main charge was the kitchen. She did her work there with as much diligence and care as she would have taught catechism. To accomplish her daily duties as perfectly as possible seemed to her the best way of working as a true missionary. In the chapel, even more deeply recollected in the presence of God, she usually remained kneeling without ever leaning on anything, her hands joined, her eyes fixed on the monstrance, attracted by the only object of her love. Sister Maria Assunta used every means, even the simplest, in order to tend always towards a higher perfection. Prone to obey at the least sign from authority, one evening she overcame her fear of the dark, going alone to the bottom of the garden in spite of the darkness of the night. Such consummate virtue would have to make her ripe for heaven in a short time. At the beginning of 1905, a typhoid epidemic took four victims from the house of Dong Yukio. On the anniversary of her departure for the missions, Stricken in her turn, Sister Maria Assunta straightway serenely claims death very close. Generous even to the complete sacrifice of herself, she asked the Superior if she could offer her life for the cure of one of her dying sisters. After a few days in a stable condition, the illness became worse, leaving no hope of a cure. Sister Maria Assunta peacefully recollected herself in the thought of heaven. Even when she was delirious, she murmured prayers, invoking Jesus and Mary, like a refrain very dear to her heart. She could be heard repeating in Chinese, Eucharist, Eucharist. Finally, for Sister Maria Assunta, there came the time for the supreme call. On 7th April 1905, at the close of day, her soul entered into the repose and peace of the Lord, whilst around her mortal remains a heavily penetrating, mysterious perfume came to pay homage to her holiness and her heroic virtues. To this first sign from above, there was added the miraculous preservation of her virginal body, found intact at the exhumation in 1913, and from this day on, from all parts of the world, testimonies of gratitude multiplied, affirming the efficaciousness of recourse to the loving intercession of the humble servant of God, the beautiful virginal little flower of the great religious family of Mother Mary of the Passion. I desire that the Institute in itself and each of its members be an adoring, expiating, imploring lily. Let me form angels of the Eucharist to give to the earth the kingdom of charity and truth. Words of our very venerated Mother Foundress.